Okay, great. And then am I doing speaker or gallery? I'm just checking. All right, great. All right, Greg. I'm so excited for this conversation. Thank you again for
I
being
am too. Oh, I'm excited. Thank you.
awesome. Okay, so I'm going to officially start the webinar, and we're
All right.
also streaming on Facebook. If anyone is with us on Facebook right now, hello, hello, hello. So awesome to have you guys with us. And this is being recorded, and we have participants beginning to stream in. Hello, hello, everybody, and welcome. It feels like it's been a while since we've been together, so I'm so excited that you're joining us today. Do throw in the chat where you're joining from. I know it's good morning, good evening, and good afternoon for so many of you coming from all over the world. Don't be shy. Yeah, let us know. Caroline from Colombia. Great to see you, hear you. Great for you to be with us. Feel free, Scotland, Edinburgh, Argentina, Barcelona, Arizona, Ohio. This is so lovely. Oh, so Cape Cod, awesome. Florida, Chicago. My goodness, it is so awesome to have this international gathering. And well, it's no surprise, I think, for all of us, how beautiful it is that we can connect in this way virtually across space and in the same time, right? It's so amazing. My name is Dr. Shamini Jan. If any of you have not met me before, I host these wonderful Ask Me Anything sessions on behalf of the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, which is a nonprofit or social profit collaborative accelerator that brings together our luminaries in science, in healing, in education, and in art so that we can all collectively lead each other to heal ourselves. And I'm so very grateful to have this opportunity to have an incredible guest with us who needs no introduction. And yet it's my honor to introduce him. Greg, thank you so much for joining us. I know that most everyone here knows very well who you are, but I want to sing your praises a little bit, if you don't mind, for those who may be joining us that are new to our community. May I introduce to you Greg? If you don't know Gregg Braden, he's a 5-time New York Times best-selling author, a scientist, and an international educator. He has been known for many decades for his pioneering work and teaching in the emerging paradigm that is based in science, social policy, and human potential. You may not know that actually from 1979 to 1991, Greg worked first as a problem solver during times of crisis for Fortune 500 companies, including Cisco Systems, where he was the first technical operations manager in 1991. He's carried this work out today. He's doing work with many different organizations, including the Advancement of Science, the AAAS, the Evolutionary Leadership Organization, the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research, the Arlington Institute. He is the author of over 12 award-winning books now published in 40 languages. Greg, thank you so much for being with us. Oh, I think you're muted.
I'm so excited to be with you today, and I apologize. Our internet is dropping in and out. So I promise if I disappear, I will reappear just as quickly as I can.
Yes,
And
no problem at all. And
yeah, well, I'm coming to you today. It's a studio outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And sometimes the internet is better than others. So it's an honor to be with you. I'm excited. This is a dance. I'm going to follow your lead in this dance, and let's see where we go.
well, I so appreciate it. And for those of you who are joining, you know that this is a great opportunity for you who have joined live because this is an Ask Me Anything session. So we get to hear from Greg's wisdom and get your deepest questions answered. And so for those of you who are joining us on Zoom, if you're new to this is how it works. You simply go to the bottom of your screen and you'll see something that says Q&A. Please don't type in chat because if you type in chat, it goes so fast, sometimes we can't track. But if you put your question in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom right of your screen, we will see it and I will ask the question on your behalf. So please feel free to go ahead and do that. Also, just a quick plug for those of you who have joined us as Chi contributors. Thank you so much. As I mentioned, we are a social profit. And for those of you who are Chi contributors, you know what benefits you get from being a Chi contributor. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's pretty simple. It is a tax-deductible donation of $108 a year, which is like $9 a month, about the cup of, of a green juice really for a month or something like that. And you get even more nutrition for your mind, body, and soul with your contributorship. And I'll tell you why. Not only are you helping us to do these kinds of events, we have an incredible staff that helps make this happen. I get the glory of being able to sit with amazing people like Gregg. But my staff, for the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, all of the people who make this happen, your donation helps support them to do this. And so when you join as a contributor, you will get access to this AMA and about 100 hours of Ask Me Anything sessions, webinars, conference proceedings, discounts to our conferences, and more. So you get well worth the price of admission. You can access all of that wisdom at any time. We have Gregg, we have Bruce, we have Deepak, we have Donna Eden, we have all of your favorite people really sharing wisdom, and you get to tap in with them at any time. So Jason has put, I think, in the chat window, the join link. It's really super simple. You just click on that, and we're so grateful for your support. So there's my plug, and now I will kind of be quiet. But Gregg, since I have the liberty of sitting with you right now, I'd love to ask you the first question, which is, wow, what an amazing and incredible time we are in, right? And I think for many of us, there's this light of hope that we're holding in our hearts. So what have we learned during this time, this trying 2 years? For most of us, it's been trying, right? In some way, in some capacity. It has pointed us toward the imminent future. Should we continue on the trajectory as we have been continuing? This is some of what we could expect. And there's also this glimmer, more than a glimmer, a bright light of hope for the future that I feel many people are carrying, a renewed enthusiasm and a renewed energy to perhaps shift the way that we do things as a collective humanity, both for ourselves and the things we may do for ourselves and for others. So I'm just curious, how are you sitting with all of this right now? And what comes to you as, the ray of hope that lights your heart during these times?
Well, that's a big question. It's a big. Uh,
Oh, I think we may have missed him a little bit. It was such a big question, it may have bombed the internet on his side for a moment, but I'm confident that Gregg will come and jump back in with us. We'll just give him a few minutes. Oh, and I see some lovely notes in the chat here. Thank you so much. And yes, to John who says he is, he contributes to the Institute of Noetic Sciences. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that, because the Institute of Noetic Sciences is such a great organization. They're actually a partner organization for Chi. And, while we're waiting for Gregg to come in, I'll just share with you that if you're new to Chi, we describe ourselves as an initiative, really, is what we are. So we partner with many orgs, including the Institute of Noetic Sciences. Oh, Gregg, you're back. That's great.
I'm back. I'm apologize.
Oh, I think you cut back off again. There is a suggestion, if you're still with us and you can hear me, to maybe cut off your video, as sad as that is, because we would love to see you. It could be that we could just do audio with you for now, and that might help. So let's see. I'll text him too, you guys. Thank you for your patience. Sometimes these things happen. You can try joining us on audio. Let's see what he says. Yes, waiting with ease. Thank you, Joan. I appreciate it. Very, very sweet. Yes, these things happen. And while we're waiting for a moment, it's great for us to just take a collective breath together, right? Again, I want to thank you all for being with us. It's really a super, super honor. Yeah. Yes, still happy, Jack. I'm so happy that you are happy. Yes, the eclipse, absolutely. The eclipse has brought many interesting things to friends and family.
Okay, am I with you?
You are.
All right, so let me just explain. We're having bad weather. So I have a plan A and a plan B that just broke. So we are now on plan C. I've got a backup satellite dish. It works, but the problem is there's a delay. It's like I'm on CNN, halfway around the world. So I apologize for the delay, but I think we'll have a good connection.
Yeah, that's great. It actually already seems better. So thank you so much for that.
All right, so it's called country internet, but the satellite we got a clear shot at the satellite, so we're good. So let me back up. I am a scientist. I'm a degreed earth scientist, a geophysicist, and and I say that because I was trained to look at the big picture first. So when we look at the big picture of where we are in the world today, we are living a rare convergence, Shamini, of cycles. Some cycles that we rarely talk about. Climate cycles, certainly we're all aware of by now. But we're living cycles of economic change. We're living cycles of financial change that affect all of us. We're living cycles of human conflict that are directly linked to magnetic shifts in the earth and the sun. All of those are converging right now. Any one in and of itself would be enough to change the way we think and we live. And the fact that they're all converging now has set into motion a time unlike any other in 5,000 years of recorded human history. So within that context, COVID comes along. What COVID has done is accentuated and exacerbated the parts of our thinking and our living that are not sustainable and that don't work. And it's done it in a really brief period of time, 2 years. We've all been put to the test in one way or another. And I think what we're finding, Shami, is we're finding the things that are good tend to be even better, and the things that were marginal, the things that are unsustainable, those are the things that are breaking down. So when we begin looking at what's happening in our world, if we look closely, the only things that are breaking are the things that are unsustainable, the unsustainable ways of thinking and living. And we're learning on this huge learning curve, this accelerated path where we get to see this very, very quickly. And the question is, do we love ourselves enough to embrace the deep truth of what the best science of the modern world is revealing about who we are and how we can embrace these changes in our lives? And now, interestingly, many of the principles that are now being borne out by the best science parallel those of our most ancient and cherished spiritual and indigenous traditions. They didn't have the science, but they understood us and our relationship to our own bodies and to one another and the earth and to the cycles. So it's a time we've never seen a time like this. And what I'll say is there is a lot of hurt in the world right now. And rarely in modern history have people been taught how to deal with the hurt in their lives. I'm a product, I was a kid in 1950s, 1960s. Resilience was suck it up and get over it. And that was the way, we were taught to deal with the hurt. So what's happening is because the hurt is not being addressed, we're not mourning the loss of our world and our way of life and our loved ones, that hurt is being expressed and experienced as fear. And the fear often comes out as hate in the world. And when we begin to look at it from this perspective, we see this tremendous opportunity for a level of healing on a global level as well as an individual level, nations, societies, communities that we've never seen before. And my sense of optimism is because we're going to have a better world. We're already seeing it begin. We're going to have stronger communities, stronger families, a healthier society, because we're now being forced to address these most fundamental issues of human experience.
Thank you for that. So much wisdom in what you just shared. And what comes to me is, of course, that idea that we've heard Mother Teresa say, which is, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. Well, a lot
Mm.
of us are stuck with our families during the pandemic, right? So we had to kind of learn about this from the inside out, and as we were talking earlier, really test out our theories. We had this opportunity to really test out and walking our talk in different ways, because if we can foster harmony in our own communities, and in our own families, then it's easier for us to take that out in the world. And I just love everything that you shared, and the parallels, of course, with the indigenous wisdom from what we're learning from system science is helping us understand that we're breaking that myth of separatism, right? In every
Yeah.
way, we're breaking that myth.
Well, I'd like to add to what we're talking about now because this didn't happen overnight. For the better part of a generation, Shamini, our young people have been taught something in the schools that simply is not true. They've been taught that the human body is frail, fragile, that we are flawed as a species, as a carbon-based life. We are flawed, and that we need something outside of ourselves to make life better. We need something outside of ourselves to become the best version of ourselves, to be successful. And the shining, glimmering object that has been dangled in front of us is technology. And
Hmm.
so we are living a time when technology is being touted as the answer to not just what's happening in the world around us, but to change the way that we function from within. And I think it's a really, really powerful, it's a pivotal time of coming to terms with the deep truth of just how extraordinary we are as beings. The ability to self-regulate our biology on demand is an ability consciously on demand. No other form of life that we know of has the ability to do it at will on demand. They may do it by instinct. Animals certainly do it by instinct. But we can sit down in a moment in time and say, in this moment, I choose to enhance my immune response. I choose to awaken the longevity enzymes in my body. I choose to create greater resilience to the change in my life, the changes in the world. And we're living this pivotal point where two camps are emerging. One camp that is all in on the technology because they're afraid, and another camp that is going back to more basic forms of living, where our nutrition comes from, what a family means, what marriage means, what health means in our lives, what's important to us. Those two camps are emerging simultaneously. We've got two societies that are emerging right now, and you can't do that for long. So
Well,
what I think is going to happen is this: we're going to do what humans do. We're going to check each other out, and we're going to say who's happier, who's healthier, whose lives are more fulfilled, and the answer to that question was going to drive the new the new world, the new society that's emerging. And I just wanted to say that as we go into the questions today.
it's great. Well, it really resonates with Beverly's question for you, which is, what are your thoughts on transhumanism? And I think you're alluding to it now. So,
Yeah, transhumanism. If you go to my YouTube page, I've got entire programs, no charge, really well done, produced by the Gaia television series, where I delve into this in detail. But the bottom line to transhumanism, a lot of it, Shamini, is based in fear. There are levels of transhumanism, but ultimately the goal is to become immortal in the belief that we can reduce our human experience to little pluses and minuses, ones, zeros, and store them on a computer chip that is immortal, and that intelligence, that consciousness can then be downloaded into biological life forms or artificial intelligence, artificial life forms. That's the goal, but it all comes down to the fear that we are vulnerable, powerless victims of circumstances beyond our control in the external world, and the evidence to support that. And so we ask science to tell us who we are. And the best science of the modern world is doing a very good job of revealing the facts that we're talking about now. It's not being shared in the mainstream. You're not going to hear this in the classrooms and the textbooks and CNN and MSNBC and Fox News and the documentaries. You're not going to hear it there, but science is telling us who we are. And now what we're seeing is some scientists don't like the answers. So they are pushing back on the discoveries that are revealing just what extraordinary potentials lie within us, while the circumstances of the world are asking us, man, if we're ever going to awaken the deep truth of who we are, now is the time. I can't think of a better time.
So true. And let's just discuss this and get right into it for a moment, because part of the issue, as you know, is force feeding us these models of separatism and soul materialism, meaning that we are just our physical bodies,
Right.
disease, pathogenesis, diseases outside of us. I have to seek something outside of myself to fix something that is foreign in me. All of these ways that our previous cultural views have impacted the way we view our bodies, our minds, the connections between them. And if I might, I'm also curious, we talked a little bit about transhumanism, and there's some questions here also about psychedelics. I find it very interesting because in some ways, the psychedelics, which we might also describe as entheogens, right, which is how they're often described because they're bringing us back to the spirit within. It's interesting to me to see the way that work is being put forth, in the popular media, especially in this way. I just saw, everyone's all excited now. There's this new study out about microdosing as a way of relieving depression and anxiety.
Sure.
So I have some thoughts about that, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, I'm going to preface everything I say by saying to you that I am probably biased as a purist. And I feel strongly that a big part of my purpose, if I can say that, for my time in this world, is to remind us and to demonstrate the deep truth of what it means to be a human. And I'm going to describe why that is, because we're at this critical crossroad, Shamini, where the technology, it's already happening. This isn't like futuristic. This is already happening. So I'll give specific examples. We now have chips, computer chips that can be implanted into the human brain to connect us directly to the hard drive of a computer with no wires, no other physical connection. Now, to young people, that sounds awesome. They say, cool, I can do my gaming, from my brain. But here's the thing, what the science is showing is when we begin to replace natural biology with artificial technology, our natural biology begins to atrophy because the body believes it no longer needs those functions. And when we do that in one generation, then the next generation, we no longer produce mirror neurons, for example, in the brain, or the immune response, because the body says the technology is doing it, we don't need it. And we begin to lose the very essence of our humanness. And once it's gone, it will never come back. So I'm not saying don't do it. What I'm saying is before we give our humanness away to technology, I think it's good to know what we are giving away. What are we relinquishing? So that is the danger. We're at a slippery slope right now of replacing biology with technology. When it comes to psychedelics, I'm a purist with this as well. Do they work? They can. They can definitely catapult us into altered states, or maybe more natural states, depending on how you look at it. They can break down the barriers between the veils. They can do all of those things. So do they work? They can. Are they necessary? Absolutely not. And I want to say this because I spent a lot of my adult life with indigenous peoples from all over the world, from the monks and the nuns in the highlands of central China and Tibet and the monasteries, and certainly India and Nepal, and the yogis and the mystics, the curanderos in the Yucatan, and the shamans in the Andes and all through the desert Southwest, and more. And what I want to say is, and I'll use the Tibetans as an example. The Tibetans are now documented through Stanford University as achieving the highest brain states pushing the boundaries of what scientists believe the human brain was capable of, beyond even the gamma and the hyper gamma brain states, even beyond that. And they do it all with no chemical intervention. They do it through breath, focus, meditative processes, demonstrating that we don't need it. For those that want to try it, I think it's up to the individual, but I think we have to be honest with ourselves about these the chemicals. Ayahuasca is a perfect example. And I've taught at ayahuasca retreats in Costa Rica. It's very powerful. But what the studies are showing is, you do it once or twice, no big deal. Long-term use, continuous use of the ayahuasca across the board, from Brazil, from Honduras, from Peru, from Costa Rica, it alters what it actually does is it thickens the visual cortex, and it changes the way we begin to perceive the world. Now, if you're a shaman in the jungle, that's no big deal. But if you are programming nuclear triggers at a high-tech industry during the week and ayahuasca on the weekend, it's going to change the way that you perceive that code on your screen and your ability to think and make those connections. So I think due diligence, it's up to the individual to know when and how. Now, also, I want to share a beautiful story. I saw one of the most amazing healings from ayahuasca that I've ever seen. It was with a woman who was not able to conceive, and she didn't know why. Her body was fine, her husband was fine, but they couldn't conceive a child. In her ayahuasca experience, a being came to her, and the first thing the being did was not in the ovaries and the uterus; it was in the heart. The being reached into her heart and pulled it out, and it was all dark, and it was covered with a film, and the being cleaned this film and put the heart back into her so that she had this beautiful, shiny, clean heart. And then he did the same thing in her reproductive organs, and she was pregnant within 2 weeks.
Wow.
Of that experience, and she never did the ayahuasca again. It helped her break through an emotional block due to sexual abuse at an early age that she had had trouble embracing. So it's like anything else. They're tools to be used to support us, but not crutches. When we begin to use them as a crutch, that's when we give our power away. So that's my perspective on the psychedelic. And I'm a child of the 60s. My first concert was Jefferson Airplane.
Oh, lucky you.
1968. I sat on the front row, and I told Grace Slick that I loved her, and she completely ignored me. But I have a follow-up. She now runs an art gallery in South Florida, and she read that story, and she said I can come by the gallery and tell her again. So
I love it. Yeah.
So, yeah.
White Rabbit is one of my favorite songs to sing. I love her voice, and I love that band so much. And what you said was so valuable. What was that saying in the 60s? I don't know if it was Tim Leary or Aldous Huxley or who said it. When you get the message, hang up the phone. Right?
Yeah.
So these reimages are so great to bring us back to our spirit, where the true feeling lies. And even technology, as you know, there are lots of folks trying to use VR at this point.
Exactly.
And train the mind body to replenish itself. So, we are creating the technology. But for me, when people ask me about psychedelics too, I say, well, think about where you're placing your investment in your power. How do you understand this? And so I find the microdosing thing very curious, because these sacred substances, these sacred plant medicines have been used for millennia in very specific, beautiful ways.
Yeah.
And when we co-opt that, if we will, in these sorts of ways where it's like, well, just take this now and just keep taking this and your anxiety will go away. When we know well that Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, energy healing, centering prayer, all of these things that you can do to mitigate your anxiety. There's so many ways to mitigate your depression and anxiety. So I get concerned when I see things like this.
Yeah, I do as well, Shami. And again, I'm not against it, but there's a big difference. In the indigenous communities that I'm with, people are prepared for, sometimes weeks or months before they embark upon the journey. They're prepared to embrace whatever the experience brings them. So often in the Western world, people are busy. They're at work 9 to 5, and then on Saturday night, they're going to do an ayahuasca party and go back to work on Monday. And it can be a beautiful thing, but here's the thing. Once any chemical catapults us into an altered state, if we are not emotionally prepared, if we're not psychologically prepared to embrace what that state shows us, we are stuck in that state until the chemical wears off, until we metabolize it through our bodies. And I have seen people horrified that they could not get out of the thing they were facing because they were never trained, they were never prepared to do that. And this is the beauty of what the Tibetans offer. If you have a bad experience, or a being comes to you in an altered state that frightens you, you open your eyes, you take a deep breath, you get up and walk away, and it's over. And so these are all things to consider, not judge, and I'm not judging, but these are things that rarely people honestly talk about. And everyone's different. And the other thing is, so many people don't consider that they already have other chemicals in their bodies. They might be on prescription drugs, they might be on antidepressants, even some supplements in high dosages. They don't think about how those interact with the chemical that they're taking into their bodies. And we're such powerful, yet responsive and delicate in some ways and resilient in others. So all these things, I think we owe it to ourselves to take into consideration, just to be responsible.
I so agree. I so agree. Well, also, you're getting a lot of love from folks who said they missed you. They were happy at Amelia Island. However, thank you for everybody who's joining us from Amelia Island. It's so awesome to connect again. And many of them are just wanting to know, how are you doing? Any reflections
Yeah,
on what has happened?
yeah. I'll be straight up with everyone. I tested positive for COVID. I actually didn't know I had COVID. I thought I just had a flu, which I haven't had probably. I don't know the last time. I know it's been over 10 years since I've had a flu, and I've never had to cancel a program in 30, 36, almost 40 years. So I thought I had a flu until I lost all my taste and all my smell. And that was when I knew it was COVID. I won't go into a lot of details, but what I'll say is there were complications. My primary care physician prescribed an antibiotic that I was not used to, that triggered inflammation and bleeding, and that was a lot of the problem. In addition to the COVID, all of that's behind me. I feel better than I felt pre-COVID, and I shared with Shamini, I'm working on the new Gregg version 2.0, that just loves the world and loves our community, and I love the people of the world so much. And I feel like I spoke with Bruce Lipton on the phone recently, and we both said the same thing. We feel like we're just getting started because of where we are, and there is now, Shamini, there's an openness to embrace new ways of thinking and living that we rarely see when everything's going okay. When it's going okay, you don't need a new way. But things are breaking down, and people are exhausted, they're overwhelmed, they're fatigued with information and COVID information, and there's an openness for new ways of thinking and living. So I applied all of that in my own life. My primary care physician said I actually moved through the COVID phase really quickly, complete recovery, all the taste, smell, everything is good. And I just thank you all so much. I know I had a lot of prayers from all over the world, and a lot of love and support from people I know and people I don't know. And it just means more than you all know. And I missed you all, but I knew that I couldn't be at my best, and I didn't want to endanger anybody else. And Bruce and Shamini, you guys just knocked it out of the park. And so I'm so happy that our community got to either know you better or maybe know you for the first time. And the three of us will be working together at least one event in 2022. So I'm looking forward to that as well. So
I am too. Thank you. It was such an honor. I mean, as I shared with you, just deeply touching for me. What an incredible group that we had, and such an honor to co-teach with Bruce. So we have things to look forward to. This actually relates to Carmen's question, which is, and I think you're alluding to it now, Gregg. Carmen wants to know, can you give us some good news for the next 2 years? Thanks so much. I love your work.
Well, the good news is already there. Our job is to seek it out. And it's a challenge for all of us because we are inundated with mass media with things that cause fear. So I think the first thing to do, if you haven't already, turn off mainstream information because it's biased. There's
Oh, we had you for a good run here. There's a little bit of frozenness going on, but I'm confident that Greg is going to join us back. So Greg, I'll text you in case you can't hear me and just let you know that you're frozen for us at the moment. Let's see. Hopefully he will join us back. He's on, as you heard, Plan C. It's so lovely for him to join us during the stormy time over there. It's already been dropping so much wisdom. We will definitely wait a few minutes and see if he can return back with us. And I just want to thank you guys all again for being here. So a lot of these questions are very specific for Greg, so I won't even attempt to answer them. But if you have any questions for me while we're waiting, I'm happy to share from my perspective. This is really beautiful, this question from Andrea. And, Andrea, we can, of course, ask Greg, too, about this. But, Andrea, I want to share with everybody Andrea's question because I think it's just so lovely here. Hold on just a minute, and I'll share it with you. Oh, here we go. Here's Greg.
Yeah, how can a satellite go down? I don't know what that was, but
Well,
it dropped off and then said reconnecting. So we have sources of energy right now that produce zero greenhouse gases, no carbon dioxide. They cannot be weaponized like uranium, plutonium. They can't melt down like a Fukushima reactor or Chernobyl. Made from elements that are abundant in the Earth's crust. Everybody has access to them. No one can hoard them. And we had these for over 60 years. I just did a special video on this on YouTube. You can go into all the details. We already have that. We already know how to create economies based upon sharing and cooperation rather than competition and scarcity and conflict. We already know every organ in the human body is now documented with the ability to heal itself given the right conditions, even the organs that we were told could not. So spinal cord tissue, pancreatic tissue, heart tissue, brain tissue, very well documented this is rock solid science. This isn't theory, and it's not, conspiracy. We already know these things. So we already have all the food we need to create health in our world. And the reason that our brothers and sisters are going hungry, they're starving in parts of the world, it's not because of lack of food, it's because of the lack of leadership and will to get the food to the people that need it. And I'm not saying it's America or Europe or Canada, I'm just saying in general, it's a thinking that needs to shift. So not if, because it's already happening, as we learn to embrace what the best science of the modern world has revealed and what very, very good people are attempting to implement in the world. I'm just going to say it like this, Buckminster Fuller. I'm a huge fan of Buckminster Fuller. And he said this so beautifully. He said, you'll never change the world by fighting against the things you don't like. And I think we all see this because it's creating hate and division and polarity in our families, in our communities and societies all over the world. He said, if you want to change the world, find a better way to do things and everyone will follow the better way and the old way will simply disappear. And I believe that's true. What I just said this in a lecture recently. I said, what would happen? And I think we're going to see this in our lifetime. What would happen if they had a war and nobody showed up? What if a handful of people said, we're going to have a war somewhere in the world, and the people fighting the war said, we're not doing war anymore? I believe that we will find that war is obsolete in our lifetime because the idea of war is that somebody wins, somebody loses, somebody benefits, and now everybody loses in war. So this is a perfect example where the grassroots willingness to embrace new ways of growing our food, localized economies, localized ways of supporting one another, and traditional ways of healing our bodies are now making us powerful very powerful resurgence. And to me, there's a lot of good news coming from that. But the key is it's already there. Our job is to seek it out. We have to look for it. We have, Shaman, you just mentioned Mother Teresa, and she was such a master at this. She and the Sisters of Charity would wake up in Calcutta pre-dawn. They would go into the streets. They would find people whose families had tossed them into the streets, the untouchables, with diseases that they didn't even know. And Mother Teresa and the sisters would take these people, and they would take them back to the church or the convent or wherever they were working. They would bathe them. They would put them in white gowns so that even if they only lived another hour, they lived that hour in dignity. And in the presence of all of that, in the filth and the stench and the dung in the gutters of the streets of Calcutta, Mother Teresa would find a flower growing in the dung. And in that flower, she would find beauty in the streets of Calcutta where everyone else saw horror. And I think of that a lot because the beauty is already there. The good news is already there. Our job is to seek it out, to find it, to recognize it, to embrace it, to nurture it in our lives. It's a full-time job for me and for everyone. But that's a long answer to a short question.
No, it's a beautiful answer. And I would add to that to integrate it. And it's interesting because we have a question here from Elena that, she's asking, well, how long have we as humans been hurt? And what will it take for us to mourn our losses and overcome them? And it's so relevant to what you're saying, Gregg, because when we say we are going to lead with light, we are going to lead with our hearts, we're going to lead with spirit first, we're going to move beyond the lens of separatism and division to understand that we are all a collective one. And leading from oneness is going to help us, as you say, dismantle the systems of separatism and greed and fear, right? Because when we're really leading from that place, so then the question becomes, how do we do that when communities that we know have been so deeply hurt, right? And we don't want to bypass. This is not about bypassing. This is not about spiritual bypassing and saying we're all one and whatever happened to you and your generations of people didn't matter. That's not what we're saying. And yet we understand that there's this transformational time, just like the woman that you shared who had this transformational moment with the ayahuasca, where she was able to cleanse herself of all of those residues of trauma, right? On some level, we all have to collectively go within to cleanse those traumas, right? To reemerge so that we can better lead with light. And I don't know if you have any reflections on that. How do we move forward?
Sure. Yeah, well, absolutely. And what some people are just now coming to terms with is the fact that we are all experiencing trauma. We are all traumatized because we have all experienced loss. And there are people that say, well, I don't know anybody with COVID, and it's not just COVID. At the very minimum, we have experienced a loss of a way of life. I have worn boots since I was a year old, and I collect them. I have a closet full of them. I never get rid of them. And I miss the little mom and pop boot shops. I could walk down the street and the heel cap would fall off, and I'd go in and they would fix it in 10 minutes. Those are gone. I miss the mom and pop shops and the local community that I used to support with everything that we ever needed. And many of them did not survive the economic downturn. And now it's all corporate, big box stores and things like that. As a society, this has never been acknowledged, Shamini. We've never been given the opportunity to mourn the passing of a way of life. And when I say that, it doesn't have to be a big, massive outpouring of a ritual. It can be as simple as just acknowledging at our own dinner table with our family or alone with ourselves in our meditation, I miss the world and the freedoms that I had only months ago. I miss those mom and pop shops. I miss connecting with my neighbors the way I used to. And that's where the mourning begins, with the acknowledgement and that passing. And let me share why this is important. Because if our emotions, our emotional body, and our psyche is filled with the images and the expectations of what we used to know, the expectation that we're going back to that in some way at some time. If we're filled with that, where is the room to embrace all the beautiful new ways of living and thinking that are emerging that we maybe never even thought of? How can we embrace those new things if we are clinging to the ideas and the images of the past? And this is why the mourning, individually and collectively, becomes so important. Now, I'm also going to say it's a little tricky to have this conversation briefly because we don't get to flesh it out. But we are being encouraged, and I'm going to use that word, in mass media to identify the differences and to dwell upon the differences that separate us. And we've all seen it. It began with the economy and the 1% against the 99%, or men against women, or blacks against whites, or Christians against Muslims. You know, it goes on and on and on. Each of those divisions, as you break down the alliances in society, as you break down the alliances, this is happening I have friends, it's happening at the dinner table where the kids are plugged into social media and they're being indoctrinated to think one way while the parents are thinking another way. And so they're seeing this tension in their own family at the dinner table. When social alliances are broken, which is happening now at a level we've never seen in the history of our nation, then it opens the door for another way, another idea, another principle to come sweeping in to replace what was there. If it's not a healthy way of thinking, then society then is moved, and this is moved to a new way of living. It's a very sophisticated form of social engineering, and we are all subject to this social engineering right now. And I think we all sense this, but the way to transcend it is what happens if you don't buy into the division. Yes, we have all been wrong. Part of my heritage, I have Hebrew blood and Cherokee, both sides of my family. I grew up hearing about the horrors of what happened, and I acknowledge those. And many of our listeners, people of color, people of race, indigenous people, this is our history, and we can't change that. But what we can do is say, in this moment, we choose to move forward to create a new history while we love and embrace the hurt and the pain, and we hold one another in the collective human experience to heal that hurt from the past. We can't change it, but we have to come to terms with it, and we can't come to terms with it through hate. And that is what is being encouraged, unfortunately, in our society right now. So it becomes a personal choice. Where do we choose to be on that spectrum? And I'm not saying it will happen with everyone at the same time. And then this is the beauty. I've seen this happen in the corporate boardroom on a different level. I was the youngest in the corporate. I was the first tech ops manager at Cisco Systems in the early internet, and I was the youngest in the board. And I would see this, where everyone would be thinking one way, trying to solve a problem. One person comes in with another way and introduces a different way of thinking, and it changes the way that people respond. So if you refuse to hate because of the past, you acknowledge it and you work with healing it. But if you don't buy into the hate, other people, your family, your children, your neighbors, your coworkers, they begin to respond to that. And it takes a very, very strong being to be in that place. You've got to have a rock solid spiritual anchor. You have to know who you are so that you are not swayed by the waves of the disinformation and the misinformation that is inundating our airwaves right now.
I
So,
love that. And,
yeah,
and I love what you're sharing because, the nature of the mind, as we understand it, is often to make distinctions, to discriminate. And what we have now, and Greg, I'm sure you know this, there are studies now showing that our minds have developed rapidly, actually, from an evolutionary standpoint, the way that our minds have now developed. A typical IQ test would have said the average is 100, and now it's probably, if you look back at those IQ tests in the 1950s that were given, people would be scoring more like 150. That would be the norm. So the mind has become very overdeveloped, and as you mentioned, technology, media, everything has been sort of geared toward the mind, which by its function kind of helps to discriminate things. And so they've used that sort of as a tool for fear. And so I think many of us understand that coming back into the body, reconnecting with the spiritual nature and developing ourselves even more strongly spiritually is what's going to help bring balance to our world. And interestingly, Sabine has a question about this where she really wants to know, well, we have this sense, and she wants to know from you, Greg, what kinds of processes,
Sure.
practices do you recommend to help people re-identify with their soul or self, true self nature, beyond the mind, beyond emotions, beyond thoughts?
Yeah, well, I was going to follow up with this because it doesn't do any good to talk about this if you don't have a way to remedy or to reconcile this. And first, I just want to say, by our nature, we are observant beings. So we will always observe the uniqueness among us. We'll always recognize that a person's skin is darker or lighter, or that they identify more with an Asian society, or something like. And I think there's nothing wrong with the recognition, because I'm going to make a distinction here, because that is discernment. We're discerning these unique qualities.
Oh, he'll come back, I'm sure. I love the way you're frozen though at the moment. I have to say it's super riveting. So I can't wait for you to come back and finish your sentence. And while we're waiting for you, Greg, I would just share, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what we realize is that the mind is just meant to help us, make gradations, but it's the meaning that we ascribe, right, to that. So if I see someone who is a different color than me, or I notice that their cultural origin is this, that's information. And then there's, of course, the overlay, the bias, all of these conditioned things that we've been taught that really get in the way. While we're waiting, oh, I think he might be back with us already.
Yeah.
Lovely.
So the way that we do this, and Shamini, you nailed this, is we're conditioned to be a mental society, a thinking society. We all know the brain. We've got left brain, right brain. And if you view your world and your life experiences and your relationships through the brain, you will always see the polarity of the left and the right brain. You're always going to see success and failure, worthy, not worthy, right, wrong, good, bad. You have to, because that's the way the brain works. That's the ego. But this is where the best science of the modern world now is tying this in to our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions, because the science is telling us that we have a neural network in the heart. And the beauty of the heart's neural network is there's not a left heart and a right heart. So when we view the events of the world, or our relationships, or our role in society or in a company, through the heart, you're not going to see right, wrong, good, bad, success, failure. You may discern that something is not appropriate for you in your life. You may let's use ayahuasca. It's a perfect example. Your heart may discern that ayahuasca is not what you need at this moment, but you don't judge it and judge the people that are using it, because your heart doesn't work that way. That's the brain that's going to see that. So when we begin to view our history, our relationship as a race, as a species, and the horrors, I mean, let's be honest, we have all experienced the horrors individually and collectively that have brought us to where we are today. And we can't change it, but we can definitely choose the significance that we give to it and what role it plays in our lives. So my practice is heart-centered technology. If you've seen any of my programs, the heart-brain coherence techniques that we offer, I've done at least once a day since 1991, when the Institute of Heart Math introduced these techniques, and they actually began on the West Coast in Northern California, 1991. I became affiliated with them within that year. And we've worked together and shared together and toured together, and we're now friends and family. And the reason that I think their techniques are so effective is that they've taken these spiritual principles, but in the laboratory, they have tested what works and what doesn't. And the things that don't work, we don't have to put our energy into. And the things that do work, we can refine and hone into effective techniques of self-regulation of heart intelligence. And I think this is one of the keys, Shamini. I think we will have to move to a more heart-based society. And I'm not saying we all go there. It'd be nice if we all did it on the same day. But I think what will happen is it's a movement. And as more people recognize that heart-based living, it's healthier, lower blood pressure, less anxiety, certainly more intelligent decisions when we are stressed, less stress in our lives. As we find the applications, and actually this is already happening. I know corporations, Fortune 500 corporations, that are bringing this into the company. In a million years, they would never talk about spirituality. What they say is, oh yeah, this is stress reduction and better worker productivity. But what's happening is the people doing it are tapping into a deeper knowing of themselves, and they're saying, hey, wait a minute, something else is going on here. And maybe that's the way it works.
And I look forward to the day where we can openly say spirituality, especially in scientific circles and even corporate circles, because we know there's the physical heart, the energetic heart, the emotional heart, the spiritual heart. And this is so neat because Andrea wants to share, she's a violinist. And so, she says, the anahat, the unstruck bowed instrument, and she uses frequencies of whole tone notes to induce heart-brain coherence. And so she wants to know, when is science and medicine going to catch up with this? Andrea, I got to tell you, I actually posted this recently on my LinkedIn and Facebook page. It was a beautiful summary in the Wall Street Journal that actually talked about how we're learning about the frequencies of the heart. And as a musician, and I know Gregg, you are too, you'll love this because it's what they found was that actually many compositions from very, very famous composers of the classical era, including Beethoven and others, they knew, they were listening to their hearts. They may have not been conscious of it, but as it turned out, when they analyzed, for example, the arrhythmias that some of these composers had, it came out in the music. So whether we're conscious of it or not, we're actually constantly being informed by our hearts. That's the beautiful thing. And so it's just becoming conscious of the fact that our heart's constantly sharing information, intuition, guiding us at every moment. And it's just being in presence enough, right, to be able to listen to that and to feel into it.
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening gradually. In peer-reviewed literature, which is where a lot of the medical community and the scientific community, this is where they take their cues. Peer-reviewed studies sometimes take 6 years to go through a peer review process and then to trickle down, and it's a slow process. So I had recently, right before COVID, I had a cardiac surgeon in my audience as I was talking about the 40,000 sensory neurites that were found in the human heart. They've always been there. They were just only recently recognized. And the power of zero point 0.1 hertz for this deep state of coherence. And he came to me in the break. He says, "How come I don't know any of this? How come I'm not taught this?" And I said, "Well, you're here today, and this is how it happens." And then he goes back, and he was from a very prestigious private but large medical institution. I don't want to get him in trouble in the United States, an independent medical facility. And so he now is informing his colleagues. The Institute of Heart Math, their technology, laptop-mounted technology, is in most hospitals, in the cardiac units, in most major hospitals. But here's the beauty, Shamini, it's also now beginning to show up in classrooms of young children because of stress. And every one of us is experiencing higher degrees of stress. We may not always be aware of it. But that stress is the foundation of inflammation that triggers all kinds of, I mean, I have friends telling me they've got shingles now. They've never had shingles. I've had friends, with rashes and with colds that never get colds. And, these are all signs that we are a population under stress. And the beauty is we have the tools, and our bodies are so resilient. Our bodies are made not just to survive, but to thrive in stressful times if we allow the body to do what the body knows how to do. And a lot of that comes from deep listening, which is a whole nother conversation. Maybe part two, we can talk about that.
Indeed, part two. My gosh. Greg, you've been so generous with your time with us today. I can't believe the hour has already passed so quickly. And I know many of you, we had lots of questions kind of come in. Very, very grateful for you to share your perspectives and your questions. I did my best to bring them in to the conversation in a way that really flowed with Greg today. And I'm sure we'll have more opportunities to connect with you, Greg. We're so glad that you're happy, you're healthy, lighting up our hearts while everyone I know is sending you, beaming you lots of love. I know that there was a question about, can we watch a replay of this? Yes. So as I mentioned, we are a social prophet. We want to get this information out to everyone. That is our reason for being, and that's what we do. So you will receive a link to a replay of this conversation that will be good all weekend. Send it to your friends, send it to everyone. If you'd like to dive into this wisdom and even more wisdom, as I mentioned, over 100 hours of wisdom at least from Greg and so many of our beautiful colleagues and leaders in this place, please consider joining us as a Chi contributor if you haven't. And Jason will put that link in the chat. We so appreciate your support. Depending on how many of you guys come forth to be part of this giving and receiving economy, we'll be able to continue these next year, Goddess willing. And Greg, again, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. It's such an honor. It's so good to see you.
Shami, it's good to see you. It's the first time we've done this. I hope it's not the last. I want to thank everybody behind the scenes. Jason, brother, thank you for all of your love and support. I'm going to apologize for the in and out on the internet. Thank you all for your patience with that. It was interesting, toward the end of the program, I was reconnecting faster and faster. So there's probably something going on there. But especially, I want to thank everyone who shared a part of your day with us, or if you're seeing the recording, thanks for sharing a part of your day with us. It means a lot to us. And I look forward to our next. Thank you.
Me too, Greg. Thank you. And thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Bye.